completing the Metropolitan Line in 1863. It was both the world's first subterranean and rapid railway system today.
Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos ao meu canal. Meu nome é Natália, mas você pode me chamar de Nath. Eu adoro reagir e aprender sobre outros países, especialmente aqueles que são bem diferentes do meu em termos culturais e econômicos. Então, se você gosta desse tipo de conteúdo, você pode ficar à vontade para se inscrever. E se você já estiver inscrito, não esquece de ativar as notificações. Nesse vídeo, eu vou reagir à história de Londres, a mega cidade da Grã-Bretanha. Então é isso, sem mais delongas, e vamos para a reação.
The world's largest city, until 1925, is now a mature, well-planned metropolis with a population of 13.7 million. It's a highly admired place and is consistently ranked as a top 3 most visited destination on the planet, making its airspace the busiest on Earth. As the largest urban economy in Europe, with the greatest concentration of top-class universities, it has hosted the Summer Olympics a record 3 times. It has something for everyone, whether you're after luxury, the world's most 5-star hotels, nature, the world's largest urban forest in a city with more than 40% green space, sports, the world's highest total stadium capacity, or entertainment, the world's biggest theater audience. But while the high life continues for many, this city has seen its share of tough times.
Caramba, eu não tinha ideia que Londres tem o espaço aéreo mais visitado. Que incrível!
This is London, the Empire City. Londinium was founded in 43 AD along the River Thames as a gateway for goods and people entering Britannia from every corner of the Roman Empire. A walled city covering roughly 1.5 square kilometers, Roman London reached a population of 60,000 in the 2nd century. But the empire soon came under severe crisis, and by the 4th century, Londinium was completely abandoned. After 700 years, what was now called London had recovered to become the largest town in England. The construction of Westminster Abbey in the 11th century ensured its place as the heart of the country. Since then, the Abbey has hosted every coronation of an English or British monarch. Its most recent royal wedding was Prince William to Catherine Middleton, and last month, the state funeral of Elizabeth II took place at the Abbey. Sitting alongside is the Palace of Westminster, home to the government of the United Kingdom with its 2 houses of Parliament. Westminster lies just southwest of the City of London, a ceremonial district that covers a bit more than a square mile. It constituted most of settled London through the Middle Ages and is today one of the world's most important financial centers. The Royal Exchange, seen here with work being done to its facade, was the center of London commerce. Originally opened by Queen Elizabeth I, royal heralds still shout the news of historic events from its steps, like the dissolution of Parliament and the start of a new monarch's reign.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip, hooray!
Just outside the city's borders is the Tower of London. Originally a castle built by King William the Conqueror, it has served as a grand royal palace, a prison, a treasury, a menagerie, the Royal Mint, a public record office, and the home of the crown jewels of England.
Gente, eu sei que são só algumas imagens ilustrativas aqui, mas eu não posso evitar dizer o quão lindo é esse contraste com as coisas modernas e velhas. Isso não é desse mundo, é perfeito.
In the 1660s, it was an armory, during the most destructive event in London's history. Still reeling from the Great Plague that year that had killed 100,000 people, nearly a quarter of its population, Londoners awoke on the morning of September 2nd, 1666, to high winds and smoke. Over 4 days, most of the medieval city was destroyed by a raging fire. The Tower of London garrison used gunpowder to create effective fire breaks that stopped the fire's spread to the east. Although there's never been an official death toll, several thousand were likely killed, and thousands of buildings were reduced to ash, including over 13,000 homes 90 churches, and St. Paul's Cathedral.
Meu Deus, uma
In the
verdadeira
aftermath,
catástrofe.
many architects submitted plans reimagining grand boulevards along a grid system that would become popular in urban America. But the businessmen of the city were eager to rebuild and mostly stuck to the old street plan, although they widened some streets and built with brick and stone rather than flammable wood. Even without an extensive redesign, the cost of the rebuild forced the City of London Corporation into default and forced thousands of its newly homeless residents to resettle in the countryside, with a little push from King Charles II, who feared they might revolt. So how did London survive a devastating plague and fire in the same year? The simplest explanation is that the culture of the city at this time was historically dynamic, cultivating ingenuity in every aspect of society. London's population had recently exploded leading up to the Great Plague and Fire, growing from 50,000 to 500,000. As the main port in the North Sea, its ships were taking full advantage of new trading opportunities in the Americas and Asia. And one new commodity they brought back gave Londoners a huge jolt: coffee. The foreign brew was served in houses that became meeting places to catch up on and debate the news of the day. Soon, houses catered to particular trades like craftsmen, writers, and explorers. The free exchange of ideas they encouraged gave rise to the UK's National Academy of Sciences, whose members included the coffeehouse-addicted Robert Hooke, the great Isaac Newton, chemist Robert Boyle, philosopher John Locke, and prolific architect Christopher Wren. Coffeehouse culture also fueled.
Gente, que incrível isso, porque já naquela época já tinha tantos pensadores assim no Reino Unido. Isso realmente é fascinante, mostra muito da cultura da época, da questão da educação também. Mas é muito, muito doido, porque aí você vê que John Locke simplesmente ainda influenciou nessa democracia, né? A questão dos direitos individuais, realmente é muito, muito fascinante. Mas o que tinha também na água do Reino Unido naquela época que, tipo, tinha tantos pensadores assim, né? Muito, muito intrigante.
The world's first great capitalist economy. Edward Lloyd's house specialized in obtaining the most reliable shipping news. A waiter there would read out the latest bulletins, then pin them to a wall, attracting long-distance traders eager to make deals on site. Today, Lloyd's has evolved into the world's main insurance market, an unseen but vital engine in the globalized economy, where brokers and underwriters can still meet face-to-face to form the trust necessary to close deals that are too risky or unique for any other market. This culture also established in 1694 the Bank of England, creating a publicly financed national debt, an innovation that positioned Britain as a global superpower and its capital as the world's most important city of the 1700s.
Wow.
London's wealth allowed it to finance the most powerful navy the world had ever seen. The memorial column at Trafalgar Square commemorates the victory that cemented Britain's superiority on the high seas. The battle saw an outnumbered Admiral Horatio Nelson bravely sacrifice his life while leading his warships into the heart of the combined Spanish and French fleets, decimating them without losing a single British vessel. The victory ended any hope European conquerors like Napoleon had for invading Britain by sea, and set the stage for a peacetime boom. Propelled by inventions like the electric motor by London's Michael Faraday, the Industrial Revolution brought rapid urbanization and growth, and by 1831, London was the largest city in the world. It was also filthy. The Thames was an open sewer, capturing the waste of 3 million people. The stink and cholera it produced was unbearable. Chief Civil Engineer Joseph Bazalgette was put in charge of creating a modern sewer system, an innovative mega-project involving hundreds of miles of brick and cement tunnels combined with several pumping stations to move the sewage a few miles downriver and release it safely away from London.
Caramba, é muito, muito doido, porque é tanta coisa acontecendo, né? Ao mesmo tempo, tipo, você tem a questão da Revolução Industrial, ao mesmo tempo você tem a questão ali de Napoleão tá atacando, tipo, em um curto período de tempo, e também essas engenhosidades. Uau! Realmente é uma história muito, muito rica de vocês.
Another engineering marvel at this time was the underground. Through trial and error over 20 grueling years, project mastermind John Fowler's team perfected the technique of cut and cover, completing the Metropolitan line in 1863. It was both the world's first subterranean and rapid railway system. Today, it is the third longest metro system on Earth.
Gente, é que eu acabei de falar, meu Deus, eu juro que eu não sabia que o metrô era tão velho assim e que tinha o dedo de vocês no meio. Como que isso não é ensinado nas escolas? Porque eu realmente não sabia. Caramba, já naquela época vocês já tinham essa mentalidade.
And is still growing. The 19 billion pound Elizabeth Line was inaugurated this May, completing a phase that was the biggest construction project in all of Europe. The quality of transportation available to Londoners, including their roads and stagecoach service, allowed them to settle and commute farther from the city centre. With the population passing 6 million in the 1800s, middle-class workers were looking for homes with a modest garden. So developers built sprawling tracts in the outskirts, including the Beacon Tree Estate in Dagenham, with more than 25,000 semi-detached dwellings.
Que curioso o formato das ruas. É muito diferente do jeito que é aqui. Pra mim parece mais organizado do que é aqui. E tem muito verde também.
It was the largest housing development in the world. It seems suburbia began in Britain, foreshadowing the sprawl that was to come to places like Los Angeles. As London swallowed up more and more of the surrounding countryside, authorities contained it by reserving wide swaths of land for a green belt 7 to 10 miles deep around its built-up area. This so-called girdle could only be left wild, turned into parks, or used for agriculture, an idea sold to Londoners as guaranteeing their access to recreation. The citizens of Britain's other cities wanted access to clean air and nature too, and soon were adopting green belts of their own. In 1941, after Hitler's Air Force bombed London for 8 months, killing more than 30,000, many buildings were destroyed. However, with the green belt restricting development, the cost of the land available to build on rose, a trend that has continued until today, when 70% of the cost of a new building is now the purchase of the land, compared to just 25% in the 1950s. This has contributed to a severe shortage of affordable housing, and sparked a much-needed conversation about how to more wisely use London's precious public lands in ways that actually benefit the general public. Another post-war development was an increase in immigration to London from the British Commonwealth countries of India, Jamaica, and Pakistan. Today, more than 4 million Londoners are foreign-born, the fourth largest immigrant community in the world after New York, LA, and Paris. But drawing so many new arrivals has contributed to London's housing crunch, and the megacity now has the highest real estate prices in Europe. So developers try to stack more square footage on each plot of land, making buildings taller and changing London's notoriously low-slung skyline. The financial districts are home to most of the 103 buildings taller than 100 meters, the second most skyscrapers in Europe, behind Moscow. As a picturesque riverine city with layers of historic architecture, gorgeous greenscapes, an economy that hums along as the capital of one of the world's most stable democracies, it's no wonder why people and their money are drawn to London.
Isso é curioso, porque ele falou antes, né, que o metro quadrado era um dos mais caros da Europa, mas agora ele já tá falando um ponto super positivo que atrai as pessoas justamente para esse lugar com um dos metros quadrados mais caros. Então, tipo, não tá, ao meu ver, em desequilíbrio. Porque você tem, sim, que pagar um pouco mais, mas você tem um retorno disso. Então, assim, ao meu ver, está realmente em harmonia aqui nesse caso.
However, the twin challenges of assimilating millions of foreigners and adapting to the rising cost of living, especially for those outside the capital, helped sway a majority of British voters to leave the European Union in the summer of 2016. A decision that continues to challenge the churn of occupants at 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence. Just across from St. James Park is Buckingham Palace, official residence of the head of state of the United Kingdom. the newly crowned King Charles III. While both
Como
Brexit
tem
and the
verde.
role of a monarch in a modern society pose internal political challenges for the entire country, London is also grappling with the wicked problem facing the entire world: climate change. During the record heat wave this July that saw temperatures reach 40.2 Celsius or 104.4 Fahrenheit at Heathrow Airport, numerous parts of London were again ablaze. To the east, the steadily rising sea presents an enormous flood risk to an estimated £200 billion worth of property along the Thames, a tidal river. To protect the city, an impressive 520-meter retractable barrier was built in 1984, a structure the Environmental Agency believes should last, with slight modifications,
Uau!
until 2070, a testament to the foresight of its design and engineering team.
Que curioso isso. Aqui no meu país, na região sul, teve uma inundação. Eu não sei se apareceu nos jornais aí, mas a água subiu tipo uns 5 metros no meio da cidade, ficou realmente um caos, foi uma catástrofe. Muitas pessoas morreram, tinha corpos boiando na água, inclusive de bebês. Foi horrível. Mas um dos motivos foi justamente negligência da administração pública. Porque era para ter umas barreiras para impedir a água, caso acontecesse alguma inundação, e elas estavam totalmente velhas, enferrujadas, e elas não funcionaram. Então, isso foi causado meio que por uma negligência pública. E aqui a gente vê que em 1984 vocês fizeram isso, e isso é uma coisa que tende a durar até 2070, pelo que eu entendi. Então, é uma coisa que foi feita na década de 80 e que ainda visa proteger as futuras gerações. Muito, muito interessante.
Water also presents another challenge. While London is sometimes perceived as consistently socked in by fog and gray skies, it actually receives just half the rainfall of New York City, despite a significantly more northern latitude. It even gets less rain than the fairly dry cities of Rome, Lisbon, and Sydney. The problem is that the western half of southern England catches most of the rain systems from the Atlantic, receiving about 4 times the precipitation as the eastern half. As things continue to get drier and more unpredictable, hydrologists warn that London, on the eastern, dry side, may begin having water supply problems by 2050. So a debate is ongoing about whether to submerge a swath of Oxfordshire on the Thames to create a reservoir to store water for the megacity. But although London faces a few challenges from forces beyond its control, solving them seems relatively straightforward.
Gente, ele falou sobre crise hídrica. Agora me chamou a atenção, porque aqui no meu país a gente passa muito por isso, sabe? Tipo, o tempo todo tem lugares faltando água, e tem uma coisa também que é rodízio, que é quando eles desligam o abastecimento de água de alguma região e deixa outras funcionando, aí depois passam uns dias, eles desligam da região que tinha água, e eles ficam assim revezando. E aí, eu agora estou curiosa, isso acontece aí na cidade de vocês? Porque eu realmente não sei, sabe? Eu não sei se é um problema só daqui, que aqui a gente é um país que tem recursos, mas não é muito bem distribuído para a população, sabe? Então, o nosso PIB per capita, ele não é muito forte, tipo, ele é literalmente muito, muito baixo. Então, deixa aqui nos comentários para eu saber, porque eu fiquei curiosa sobre isso. É muito curioso que vocês estejam atentos a essa questão da crise hídrica, porque muitos lugares não estão se atentando a isso, inclusive meu país. Então, deixa aqui nos comentários para eu saber.
And looking ahead, London's position, well away from the coast, on a temperate island with no active volcanoes, is one of the most advantageous locations for any major city in history, which should allow it to continue as a top global city well into the 2100s. If you enjoyed this episode, check out my look at Jakarta, Indonesia's megacity, whose citizens face a far less certain future. And next up is Tehran, the capital of Iran.
Gente, adorei saber a história da cidade de vocês, porque é realmente fascinante. Londres tem uma história fascinante, porque se você fizer uma linha, né, cronológica, como foi feita aqui no vídeo, você vê que, tipo, teve sim momentos baixos, né? Tipo, no início teve a questão do incêndio, teve a questão da peste também, onde muitas pessoas perderam a vida. Mas você vê que depois Londres foi conseguindo se reerguer. e manter essa estabilidade, né? Tipo, isso é muito incrível, porque é uma coisa que você pode levar até para sua vida também. Tipo, Londres caiu, mas conseguiu se levantar. Então, por que a gente não pode fazer isso também, né? Mas eu achei incrível mesmo toda essa questão, como vocês estão atentos também ao planejamento urbano e também a questão da crise hídrica, da questão da inundação, a estabilidade também que é dita aqui que vocês têm na democracia de vocês, né? Na questão também de investimentos financeiros, como isso atrai, realmente isso acaba impactando bastante, né, no desenvolvimento de uma cidade. Mas eu achei realmente incrível. Eu também fiquei surpresa como aqui é dito algumas coisas no início do vídeo, como ter muitas glórias, né, muitas conquistas. Tem também a questão de ter o espaço aéreo muito movimentado. E assim, eu não tinha ideia disso, então realmente achei fascinante. Acho que outros lugares deveriam se inspirar em Londres. Eu não vou comparar com a minha cidade. A minha cidade é uma cidadezinha bem pequena, tem 50 mil habitantes, então assim, acho que é meio injusto, né, comparar. Mas Rio de Janeiro, eu acho que com certeza deveria se inspirar muito em Londres, porque é uma cidade que teve uma evolução incrível e isso é inegável. Mas essa foi a minha reação. Eu espero que você tenha gostado. Se você gostou, aproveita para se inscrever, ativa as notificações e deixa mais sugestões aqui embaixo nos comentários. Se você já tiver inscrito, deixa mais sugestões também e não esquece de ativar as notificações. Então é isso e a gente se vê no próximo vídeo. Tchau!